It's 1969. The war is winding down, and a squad of American soldiers gets told to protect the village from those pesky North Vietnamese. Private Devereaux goes looking for his buddies in the pouring rain, only to find them dead. The villagers aren't doing so hot either, and they're all missing their ears. He wanders into a shack, a little freaked out, and finds Sergeant Scott totally off his rocker, responsible for the whole mess. Scott's sporting a delightful necklace of ears, and he's got the terrified kids as hostages. Devereaux tries talking sense into Scott, telling him the war's over. But Scott loses it. He shoots the boy and tells Devereaux to shoot the girl to prove he's still on Team Crazy. Devereaux says no way, and when Scott goes to kill the girl himself, Devereaux puts a stop to it. He grabs the girl and makes a run for it, but Scott shoots Devereaux in the back and then blows the girl up with a grenade. Devereaux, understandably ticked off, turns around for a showdown, but they both shoot each other at the same time and end up dead. Next morning, some U.S. Special Forces guys show up. Their boss tells them to pack the bodies in ice and never speak of this whole mess again. Flash forward to 1992, and some terrorists are having a wild time at the Hoover Dam in Nevada. Bodies everywhere, not a pretty sight. The cops tried to be heroes, now they're added to the body count by their cars. More hostages, more demands from the terrorists, the usual. Turns out the cops are getting kicked off the case because the army's sending in the Universal Soldiers, the coolest counterterrorism crew around. Guess who's on the team? Devereaux and Scott, now known as the way less sketchy GR-44 and GR-13. They're back from the dead, no memories, and basically act like robots, orders in, emotions out. Meanwhile, a crowd of nosy Parkers is gathering, and TV reporter Veronica shows up to get the scoop. She's late, as always, and this time it costs her the job. Our robot soldiers take a dive and climb the dam, all sneaky-like. Devereaux and Scott take out some guards, then hook up the bad guys' radios to a loop so the other soldiers think they're still alive. They keep going, beating up everyone in sight, but one soldier finally finds the big boss terrorists and promptly gets filled with lead. Surprise! Turns out bullets don't do much to this guy as he gets back up and starts blasting back. Devereaux and Scott show up to save the day, but Devereaux gets hit with some Vietnam flashbacks when he sees the hostages. He sees Scott and remembers that this dude ain't exactly a hero. The distraction makes him freeze up and ignore his radio. Outside, Colonel Perry, head honcho of the whole robot soldier project, is playing dumb for the reporters. This gets Veronica super curious and she decides to tail him, determined to get the story and win her job back. Turns out, these super soldiers can heal super fast and are super strong too. But they overheat a lot and need a special brain juice to keep them in line and their memories hidden. The tech team's trying to figure out why Devereaux froze up. When they ask him, he starts spilling the beans about Vietnam, which Scott overhears. Tech guys are late. Maybe these need a little time out until they get their heads on straight. But Perry says nah. Those memories were just a fluke. Give him more brain juice. Outside, Veronica's ditching her cameraman because she's way too curious for her own good. He complains. She ignores him. Typical. She sneaks onto the base with a camera and randomly opens a box. Surprise! It's a wounded soldier looking very dead. She starts snapping pics, but then the dude wakes up and scares the living daylights out of her. She accidentally sets off an alarm. Oops. Veronica hauls it back to the car, but the soldiers are already there. Her getaway ends in a spectacular crash. Soldiers drag them out, waiting for orders. Perry tells them to grab the camera and head back, but Scott's not having it. Suddenly he shoots the cameraman, and bam, Devereaux's flashbacks come rushing back. He knocks Scott out to save Veronica, then hijacks a military car with her in tow. Scott shoots at them, but they only stop when Perry starts yelling at Devereaux over the radio. That voice snaps Devereaux back into soldier mode for a second. Veronica rips the headset off, Devereaux gets his head together, and they make a break for it. Scott calls Devereaux a traitor, just like in Damme. Seems like his memories are coming back too. Back inside, the techs are freaking out because, shocker, a soldier just shot a random guy. They want to shut down the whole project. Perry's like, no, we're all going to jail because no one in the Pentagon knows what we're really doing here. Then he declares they're going after Veronica and Devereaux to stop them from spilling the crazy beans. So the team heads out. In the car, Veronica's confused about why Devereaux helped her. He just wants out of the army and to go home. Veronica notices he's got a bullet hole, but Devereaux shrugs it off and burns the wound shut with the car's lighter. Hardcore. Trouble is, they're out of gas, so Devereaux ends up pushing the car the whole way to the station. Turns out, the gas station's out of gas too, and the phone's dead. They decide to crash at a motel for the night. Meanwhile, the super soldiers are rolling into town, and Scott takes out the phone lines just for funsies. Back at the motel, Veronica flips on the TV, and wouldn't you know, they're saying she murdered her cameraman. She tries the room phone, also dead. Devereaux is starting to overheat, so he strips down and stands in front of the AC. Veronica tries to sneak out, but Devereaux follows. He suddenly collapses, not feeling so hot anymore. Veronica sees he's practically on fire, so she bundles him into the bathtub and dumps a ton of ice on him. This helps him heal up his wound, thankfully. Veronica's panicking, so she goes to the reception to find a phone. Surprise, that one's dead too. She heads back to the room, totally missing the super soldiers creeping closer. Back in the room, Devereaux is feeling better and watching TV. It finally clicks for him. The war is ancient history, and he's been out of it for decades. Right then, bullets start flying. Devereaux shoves Veronica down just in time. He starts smashing through walls, freaking out all the other guests, and bouncing from room to room. Veronica follows and points out they're gonna get cornered. Devereaux has a light bulb moment and cooks up a plan. The super soldiers burst in, can't find them, and think they've lost the trail. Turns out, our heroes are hiding under a blanket with two random guests. They swipe the car keys and make a break for it. The soldiers see the car leaving and open fire. Devereaux plows right through the reception desk and gets away. Next day, back on the road, Veronica's got a million questions. Devereaux snaps because he doesn't have any answers. He pulls over and needs a minute to chill out. After deciding he wants to know what's up, they hit the road again and stop at another gas station. Devereaux makes the owner wait outside while he drags Veronica into the store and strips down. He asks her to check for a tracking device. Veronica does it, super embarrassed. The owner totally thinks they're getting frisky. Finally, Veronica finds the tracker on Devereaux's leg, but she doesn't want to hurt him. So, he whips out a knife and digs it in himself. Veronica's super grossed out, but she sticks her fingers in the wound and fishes out the tracker. Just then, the super soldiers roll in and start blasting the place. Turns out, Devereaux planted the tracker there with a bunch of spilled gas, classic trap. The combo of gas and gunfire makes the whole place go boom. While the tech guys are scrambling to put out the fire on their buddies, it turns out Devereaux, Veronica, and the owner are hiding in the trunks of the cars. They sneak into the truck, grab a bunch of files, then jump back in their car and escape. But out of nowhere, Scott pops up in the back seat and tries to take Devereaux out. The car spins out of control and crashes, sending Scott flying out the window. Devereaux was all grumpy about seat belts before, so thankfully he and Veronica are fine. They get out of there fast. Perry's all, mission over, back to the truck. But Scott, remembering his own name now, shoots Perry. Talk about a bad day at work. He strolls into the truck where the techs are fixing up the soldiers and presents them with Perry's ears. He declares the mission's far from over, and he's calling the shots now. A tech tries to be a hero. Scott shuts it down real quick. The others have no choice but to go along with crazy Scott. While the techs are patching up soldiers, Scott's pumping himself full of muscle juice to get even stronger. He also makes himself a snazzy newer necklace. He starts to overheat, so the techs tell him to chill out in the cooling chamber. They crank up the brain juice, hoping to knock him out. But when a tech pops in to check, Scott's wide awake and forces the guy to take the injection instead. Not good for the tech. Meanwhile, Devereaux and Veronica hit up a diner to eat and dig through those files. Devereaux's lost, so Veronica orders for him before heading out to find a phone and do some digging on a name she saw. Devereaux starts copying what other people eat, and it turns out he likes food. He asks for seconds, thirds, fourths. Waitress brings mountains of food, but when she asks how he's gonna pay, Devereaux is stumped. The owner comes to throw a punch. Devereaux dodges it easily and takes him down in one kick. The other guys in the diner try to jump Devereaux, but he mops the floor with them, even sending one dude flying out the window. Veronica sees this and gets worried. She goes to check on him, and he's just chilling with a giant bowl of popcorn. Later that night, Scott's asking around for info on Devereaux and Veronica at a bar. One local makes fun of him, and Scott beats the guy up, scaring everyone into spilling the beans. Back in the truck, the last tech gets a soldier to blow up the whole thing. Scott won't be stopped though. He rescues the buddies and dumps them in a supermarket freezer to heal up. But sadly, they don't make it. The one surviving soldier's going crazy, eating raw meat while Scott yells at random customers, promising to show them all. A bunch of cops show up, but Scott takes them down in seconds. Next morning, Devereaux and Veronica hit up a veterans hospital in Utah, following a lead from the files. They meet Dr. Gregor, the guy behind the whole program. Just seeing his face floods Devereaux with memories, the operating room, becoming a super soldier, but also flashbacks to his happy childhood. Gregor tells Veronica about his research, and then they catch the news. Perry's dead, and they're blaming her for that too. They also see the supermarket footage, and Gregor explains Scott's basically stuck in Damme, thinking he's still fighting. Afterwards, Veronica wants to expose the whole mess, but Devereaux is wiped out. He just wants to go home, so he hands her a bus ticket back to Los Angeles. Veronica takes it and acts like she's getting on the bus, but it rolls away without her. Before Devereaux can react, they're surrounded by cops and get arrested. They're carted off in a police convoy, and of course, Scott comes chasing after them in the truck. He whacks a police car off the road, then starts ramming the bus while his buddy opens fire. Devereaux protects Veronica while the soldiers take out the driver. The bus careens out of control and goes off the road. Devereaux breaks a seat to grab some metal and tries to pick the lock, while Scott keeps bashing the bus with a truck. Scott gets impatient and tosses a grenade inside. Veronica grabs it and chucks it right back out, where it explodes safely. She does the same trick with the next one, so Scott gets creative and starts throwing them all around the bus, rocking it with explosions. Finally, Devereaux gets the driver's seat and takes control, putting the bus back on the road. He grabs a cop's gun and shoves Veronica off the bus. Then Scott hits hard enough to send the bus over the edge. Scott pushes the bus towards a cliff, but Devereaux climbs out the window, shoots Scott's buddy, and jumps clear. Both the bus and truck go over together, exploding in a big OL fireball. The other cop shows up to arrest them again, but Veronica takes him down, and they steal his car to get away. Later, they make it to Devereaux's family home in Louisiana. Devereaux gets to see his folks again, and Veronica finally reaches a TV station to spill the whole crazy story. That evening, she heads out to meet some reporters who will clear her name. But when she gets in the car, the keys are gone. Turns out Scott, alive and kicking, took them. The lights cut out in the house, and Devereaux hears Scott outside, threatening his parents if he doesn't come face him. Devereaux grabs his dad's hunting gun and goes to meet Scott, who's got Veronica hostage too. They start brawling, but Scott's so pumped full of drugs that Devereaux can't put a dent in him. Scott mocks him, takes another booster shot, and beats Devereaux up some more. He smashes Devereaux against the car, then drags him over to Veronica. Scott tries to shoot her, but the gun's empty. Veronica takes the chance to run, so Scott tosses a grenade at her, just like in Damme. Devereaux loses it and charges Scott, but Scott's still way stronger and throws him into the barn with his parents. Devereaux won't give up. During the fight, Scott accidentally drops an enhancer shot, so Devereaux snaps it up and injects himself. Finally, they're evenly matched. They trade blows, smashing stuff around the barn as they go. After punching Scott in the face a bunch, Devereaux kicks him through the wall and outside. He follows, kicking Scott into the spikes of a hay harvester. Devereaux double-checks Scott's done, but Scott tries one last attack. Devereaux breaks his wrist, then flips on the harvester, finally ending it. After checking in with his parents, Devereaux goes to find Veronica's body. But she's alive. They hug it out, relieved.